Good evening, everybody. I'm Councillor Lynn Doherty and I'm the leader of West Berkshire Council and chairman of the executive. I'd like to welcome you to this meeting of the 17th of December. It's the last meeting before Christmas, so I'd like to take this opportunity to wish you all a safe festive season ahead of you. And before I go on to the normal business of this evening's meeting, I'd just like to take a moment to recognise that this is also the last meeting, or the last executive meeting, of our Executive Director for Place, John Ashworth. So John is leaving us at the end of the year. I haven't had the opportunity to formally thank him for all of his service to date, so I'm taking this opportunity to do so. John, you will be missed. Your calm and considered approach has been so valued, particularly to myself, who is relatively new to Place. So I know you've done many of these executive meetings, and I just want to take the opportunity to formally thank you for your service to West Berkshire Council. I know we'll get the opportunity to informally catch up before you go, but on behalf of all of us, I'd just like to thank you for your support for these executive meetings over the years. So thank you, John.
And very much welcome from this side as well. Go well, John. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. So I am being supported at this meeting by the Deputy Leader, Councillor Graham Bridgman. The other members of the executive present are Councillor Steve Arderwater, Dominic Bowick, Hilary Cole, Ross McKinnon, Richard Sumner, Joe Stewart and Howard Wollaston. Members of the Shadow Executive and the leader of the Minority Green Party are in attendance. These members are entitled to speak and ask questions when invited to do so by myself. Other members of council are also in attendance in the virtual waiting room and can ask questions on any item included on the agenda. They will do this by indicating electronically, and I will then invite them to be brought in from the virtual waiting room for their questions to be answered. Members who are not on the executive and not able to vote, members who are not on the executive are not able to vote on any of the agenda items. There are also a number of officers in attendance, and they include Nick Carter, the Chief Executive, our executive directors, and I've already mentioned John Ashworth, but we also have Joseph Holmes and Paul Coe this evening, who is the Service Director for Adult Social Care and standing in for Andy Sharp. Shiraz Sheikh will be the legal advisor to the meeting, and I am assisted by Stephen Chard, the clerk to the meeting, and by Phil Rumans, who will be acting as the Zoom host. I will now ask Stephen to give some reminders about the way we conduct council meetings via Zoom.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, standard Zoom reminders are now being shown on screen. In addition to those points, if it becomes necessary for any members to telephone into the meeting, you won't be able to signal to speak. So once everyone who's raised a Zoom hand has spoken, the leader will be asked to invite anyone who's telephoned in to speak in order. Any voting necessary will take place by a visible show of hands. If it becomes necessary to adjourn the meeting at any point, the leader will adjourn and advise the executive the revised date and time of the meeting. If it's a short adjournment only, you'll be able to rejoin this Zoom meeting. Otherwise, a fresh appointment will be sent out. Do members have any questions about the way in which the meeting will be conducted before we proceed? Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. We can therefore move to item 1 on our agenda this evening, which is apologies. Do we have any apologies for absence, Stephen?
The only apology is one you've referenced already, Leader, from
Andy Sharp.
Thank you.
Thank you and welcome, Paul. We can therefore move on to item 2 on the agenda this evening, which are the minutes. Are members willing to accept the previous minutes? There's 2 sets as an accurate record of the meeting held on the 19th of November. I'm going to ask for a seconder before I actually pop that to the vote, because I know
if you're proposing, Leader,
I'd like to propose that they are.
I am very happy to second.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bridgman. Can executive members indicate by raising their actual hand if they agree that the minutes can be signed as a true and accurate record of the previous meeting?
Leader, they have been approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Shiraz. I will therefore have my electronic signature added to the approved minutes. Thank you, Stephen. Item 3 on our agenda is the declarations of interest. Have there been any declarations of interest, Stephen?
None have been forwarded to me, Leader, no.
Okay, thank you. And we can therefore move on to item 4 on our agenda this evening, which is our public questions. I'd like to thank all of the members of the public that have submitted questions to this evening's executive meeting, and welcome those of you who are able to be in attendance to hear the answer to your question and ask a supplementary question if you have one. For those public questioners unable to join this meeting, I can confirm that you will receive a written response to your questions, and these will be published on the Council's website within 5 clear working days of the meeting. Please note that in accordance with the new processes, you will not need to say, "I asked the question standing in my name." Your answer will appear on the screen and will be answered by the relevant portfolio holder. You will then be given the opportunity to ask a supplementary question, but please remember that this is just to clarify the response provided and not to introduce any new business. In accordance with paragraph 5.12.9 of the Constitution, where questioners have more than one question, only their first question will be answered. If after all other first questions have been asked and answered, and there is sufficient time, we will answer subsequent questions. Please note that the time limit for public questions is restricted to 30 minutes. And if your questions have not been answered in that time, you will receive a written response within 5 clear working days of the meeting. The responses given, either verbally at the meeting or in writing, will be published on the Council's website. Now, I understand that Mr. Ian Hall has requested a written response to his question A on the agenda. And I understand that Mr. John Stewart, who had question M, did not register to attend the meeting within the set time frame. He will therefore receive a written answer to his question. I would therefore like to invite Councillor Hilary Cole to answer Mr. Graham Story's question B on the agenda. Once the question has been answered by Councillor Cole, Mr. Story will have the right to ask a supplementary question. Over to you, Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Leader. And thank you for your question, Mr. Story, for sending me the link to the article. There are currently no unsold affordable housing in West Berkshire. However, there is a mechanism within planning policy that would enable any unsold affordable houses for sale to be considered for conversion to homes for social rent. I do apologise for the background noise. My dog, for some reason, is barking. Do you have a supplementary question, Mr. Story?
I do, Councillor Cole. Can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Oh, well, thank you for that. And I'm pleased that you would consider this as a route forward. I looked today and there were quite a number of affordable homes for sale being advertised through Sovereign's website and through Rightmove. And I know a number are coming onto the market, seeing the publicity that Sovereign have been putting out, particularly for Thatcham. It's quite likely that demand for affordable housing to buy will drop post-COVID because of the economic situation. Can you give me an assurance that you will actively look at this? Because it seems better to have houses move to homes for social rent than leave them empty as unsold affordable houses, given that we have such a high demand for homes for social rent and clearly a very limited supply.
I can assure you, Mr. Story, that we will look at it. Should the houses that have been advertised to sell not be sold, but of course we can't predict that at the moment. But if we had to do it, then each case will be considered and progressed on its merit with the registered provider, Homes England, and Development and Planning. So we would look at it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for your reply.
Thank you, Mr. Story. We can therefore move on to question C on our agenda this evening, which is Mr. John Goatley, and that is to Councillor Ross McKinnon.
Thanks, Leader, and thanks, Mr. Goatley, for your question. I hope you're well. The 2 flow rate values that you quoted, they can't actually be compared directly. The new Lidl development is being designed to local planning constraints using the SUDS criteria adopted in December 2018. That 2 litres per second that you mentioned in the question, that was only a value ever proposed by planners for this site, as it was located alongside the River Kennet. Now, the A339 junction improvements extended the existing Carriageway surface water drainage system, and it used existing connections to the Thames Water surface water sewer. Now, the planning conditions governing that were approved in February 2015, using planning criteria at the time, and also in consultation with Thames Water, who own the sewer. And the discharge rates of flow from the drainage system, they're compatible with the flow rate from the system before the junction improvements. The 80 litres per second value represents a full flow storm discharge obtained from summing together flows from more than one connection point into the Thames Water sewer. So I hope that's helpful. And do you have a supplementary, Mr. Goatley?
Stephen, can you confirm, is Mr. Goatley in the room?
Yeah, sorry, I had to unmute, couldn't find the unmute. Can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Goatley.
Yes. Surely when the junction was changed, put in there, that would constitute a new development, as that junction was deliberately put there to enhance the regeneration of the London Road Industrial Estate. So it should have been all one planning application in effect. So shouldn't there have been an environmental impact assessment done then?
No, Mr. Goatley, I don't accept that there should.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Goatley. We can therefore move on to item D on our agenda, which is Mr. William Wood, and that's actually to myself. Thank you for your question, Mr. Wood. The council moved to holding remote council meetings in April this year, following the introduction of emergency legislation, which allowed local authorities to hold public meetings remotely. This has resulted in a significant improvement in the level of engagement by the public with the democratic process at West Berkshire Council. And to date, those meetings have been viewed more than 11,000 times. The council is fully committed to supporting that level of engagement with the democratic process on an ongoing basis. And officers are therefore reviewing options as to how this can be achieved. It should be noted that the legislation which permits remote council meetings to take place is time limited, and therefore without further legislation change, it will not be possible after May 2021 to continue with the current meeting format, which has been so successful. However, as I have indicated, we are already in the process of seeking technical solutions that we hope will enable us to effectively live stream our council meetings, even if they must take place at a physical location. Do you have a supplementary question, Mr. Wood?
No, great answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. We can therefore move on to question E on our agendas, which is I think it's Councillor Vaughan Williams to Councillor Ross McKinnon.
That's Councillor Vaughan Miller, I think, Peter. And hello, Councillor Miller. I hope you're well. This is an almost identical question to the one that you asked me at the full council meeting 2 weeks ago, and also your supplementary question too at that time. So I refer you to the answer I gave you at that meeting, which is available on the council's website. Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Miller?
Is Councillor Miller in the room?
He is, lady, yes.
Councillor Miller, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, sorry. I'm muted on the wrong thing. Yes, I'm a councillor at the Newbury Town Council, and we've had some constructive meetings with the West Berkshire officer, and are very willing to engage constructively with the council to get the best outcome for the town and for the football community. I know the Football Community Group, it's a community interest company, and it represents men's youth.
Councillor Miller, do you have a supplementary question?
I'm leading, give me 10 more seconds, please, and I will answer the question. I'll give the question. Just for information, the Newbury Community Football
Sorry, Councillor Miller. The process is that you're allowed to ask a supplementary question, not take us through the process.
So, just to be clear, the representation of football in Newbury, the community football group is a CIC, a community interest company, in just giving that information to the council, and is also willing and able to engage constructively. Therefore, would this council now reconsider its current approach of doing to the town by continuing with its current plans, and instead take the decision to engage with the stakeholders on both its current plans and for the replacement ground it's proposing? And the answer I'm looking for is yes. I will instruct my
Councillor,
officers to set up a
sorry,
meeting with myself, Councillor
Mr.
Wilson.
Miller, I'm sorry. We're not going to take the answer you're looking for. You've asked your supplementary question. The way this works, just so we're all very clear on the process, is you have a question you're able to submit. The supplementary question relates to the question that you submitted, and you have the opportunity to do that. If you're looking for another question, then you need to submit another question. So, Councillor McKinnon, are you able to answer Councillor Miller's supplementary question?
Thanks, Leader, and thanks, Councillor Miller. Yeah, I think when we got to the question there, I think it did sound like you were asking the same question again. So, I mean, I can only give the answer I've given. We're always happy to engage with stakeholders, but the ground will not be opened for organised football purposes, based for men's, women's, youth teams, as you suggest, for no other good reason other than that it would absolutely churn up the ground. The ground's going to be made available for recreational open space, and I think your question's been answered now several times. But thanks, Councillor Miller. Thanks very much.
Thank you both. We can now move on to item F on our agenda, which is Mr. Paul Morgan, and that's to you again, Councillor McKinnon.
Thanks, Leader, and good evening, Mr. Morgan. I'm afraid I can't give that information. That information is not available, and it will not be available until such a time when football reprovisioning works are tendered and awarded. So in terms of funding proposals, which is the second part of the question, well, they're designed to be cost neutral to the council. Do you have a supplementary, Mr. Morgan?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, my supplementary question is, yeah, disappointed. I'm surprised you haven't been able to provide that detail, because I thought as a planning process you'd have been able to. But my supplementary question is if for whatever reason that the current option you're looking at pursuing at the moment, which you're about to make an announcement in the new year, if for whatever reason that option is not either achievable or it's going to take a long time to do it, what plan B do you have in terms of a football facility in Newbury?
We do have contingency plans, but again, for the reasons that you and I have discussed a few times in the past, for commercial sensitivity and other reasons, it's not appropriate to discuss them at this stage. Thanks, Mr. Morgan.
Thank you both. We can therefore move on to question G on our agenda, and that's Mrs. Karen Swaffield, and that's actually to myself. So thank you for your question, Mrs. Swaffield. West Berkshire Council started streaming virtual public meetings on its YouTube channel earlier in the year. These meetings have been watched more than 11,000 times, as I've just said, with people able to follow the meetings live or to watch them afterwards at a time convenient to them. With questions still able to be put to the council, we've worked hard to ensure that public meetings remain open and accessible, despite the move to virtual meetings required as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. When we set up meetings, we disable comments because we do not have the resource to moderate them. And we do sometimes receive inappropriate comments on our public channels, which we have to remove. As comments are allowed by default, we have to turn them off manually each time. At this particular meeting, comments had been disabled in advance of the broadcast and would, comments had not been disabled in advance of the broadcast and were disabled retrospectively. Do you have a supplementary question, Mrs. Swaffield? Is Mrs. Swaffield in the room?
She is, Lady, yes.
Do you have a supplementary question, Mrs. Swaffield, or can I move on? Okay.
I think Mrs. Swaffield is talking, Leader, but we can't hear her.
Okay, Mrs. Swaffield, you have to unmute yourself. You should be able to unmute so that we can hear you. We can't hear you at present. Okay.
It appears that Mrs. Swaffield was unmuted, but we still couldn't hear her. It looks like a sound issue at her end.
Okay. Apologies, Mrs. Swaffield. We seem to be having some sound issues. I'm going to move on to our next question, which is Mr. Lee McDougall to Councillor McKinnon.
Hello, Mr. McDougall. Good evening. Hope you're well, and thanks for your question. The change from a football pitch to recreational open space is not a legal process. It's governed by planning procedure, so no legal advice was required. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, surely there must be legal advice required if you're impacting an asset of community value and change of use from what's within the council's policy as a protected green space. Why would you not take legal advice internally on that?
Well, the council is fully cognisant, Mr. McDougall, of the asset of community value status. As I'm sure you're aware, it allows the registrant, upon disposal of the asset in question, in this case the land at Faraday Road, to make a bid to purchase the asset at market value. There has been no such disposal. There may not be such disposal in the future. And in any case, the council would be in no way obligated to accept any bid it did receive in this context. Thanks.
Thank you both. We can therefore move on to our next question, which is item J on our agenda, which is Mr. Darren King. And the question is to myself. So thank you for your question, Mr. King. I'm encouraged to know that the broadcasting of this council's public meetings is reaching new residents in ways which we would not have done when in the physical council chamber. We have seen that with the increased level of visibility of the work of the council and its elected representatives, more people are encouraged to get involved in different degrees in local politics. Indeed, here you are asking your question of the executive following watching the broadcast. Others choose to write to the local paper or use the myriad of social media channels to express their views. The substantive item on the agenda on the 3rd of December was to discuss the Independent Pay Reviews panel's report on member allowances. This is just one of the enablers this council has addressed in recent months to support and encourage diversity. In September 2019, we brought forward a parental leave policy for members to enable those with families to enjoy the same rights as council employees. As the debate showed, there were strong feelings on the suitable level of remunerations, and indeed, as also expressed, whether there should be any at all. The technicalities on the night of what, when, and who should receive allowances detracts from the fundamental issue that it is generally accepted, as was demonstrated by the majority voting to accept the recommendations of the report, that a fair level of remuneration for councillors is just one of the enablers allowing candidates to consider standing for election. Several councillors who spoke to the paper shared the reality that there is a substantial time commitment. Time is possibly one of the most difficult obstacles to overcome for getting involved in local politics. But we should be open about this to enable those considering to take a realistic view. What the Members' Allowance Scheme seeks to acknowledge is that in order to undertake such a time commitment, it's entirely reasonable that remuneration should be forthcoming, whether that is to supplement reduced income from employment or to pay for a locum, such as our previous leader did, to cover childcare costs or fund alternative care arrangements. The remuneration helps take away one of those difficulties by supporting the elected representative financially. It is my hope that the meeting of the 3rd of December removed this barrier for those who are unaware of this support. Of course, there is always more that can be done. However, the actual selection of candidates is very much in the control of political parties and the capability of those putting themselves forward. Within my own party, I have actively been involved in events to encourage more women to stand and have spoken of my experiences to assist those considering it to make a decision. The council actively supports the local government association's Be a Councillor campaign, and I have already agreed with our local paper their support to run a campaign here locally at some point next year. So in summary to your question, I very much hope that the meeting of the 3rd of December will encourage others to think about getting involved, equipped with the knowledge that they will be fairly recompensed for their efforts. Do you have a supplementary, Mr. King?
Hi there, Leader. Yes, I do, please. So you talked about the pay rise. I was more interested in the behaviour and the tone of the meeting. And I would really be keen to understand what measures have been put in place to ensure that the impact of any encouragement from people from diverse backgrounds to actually move into local politics.
Thank you for your supplementary question, and it's an interesting one, Mr. King. I think what demonstrates in the chamber and online is that where we have a council meeting, there is debate. Not everybody will agree with one another, and everybody has the right to put forward their thoughts and opinions. The thing that we have to govern that is called Code of Conduct, which every councillor that is on West Berkshire Council signs up to, and I'm quite comfortable that everybody adheres to that, and that there will be robust political debate where people disagree with one another. And I think that's very much part and parcel of the role of being a councillor, to be able to stand up and voice your views. So I hope that, you know, we have to have a level of realism here that will be part and parcel of the role of a councillor, to be able to express your views, even if they differ to somebody else's. Thank you, Mr. King.
Thank you.
Can we therefore move on to item K on the agenda, which is Mr. Jason Braidwood to Councillor McKinnon?
Thanks, Leader, and good evening, Mr. Braidwood. I hope all is well, and thanks for your question. It's not proposed that specific user groups are identified here and given preference over other users on this temporary facility. It's the intention of the council that all users of all ages will be able to use the area for recreational sports and general outdoor activities as desired. Do you have a supplementary, Mr. Braidwood?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, carry on.
Oh, sorry, Councillor McKinnon. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so there's no forecast been done. So you mentioned earlier on a previous question then. So would that green space then that's going to the public, would that not get churned up as much as using a football pitch?
No, I don't believe it would. The suggestions that have been put forward, not just at this meeting, but on several council and executive meetings before, is that the ground is used for several men's, ladies, youth football teams, and so on. If you think about the constant usage of that, of all those teams, all the training that would go on, as well as organised matches, that grass pitch, and this is the advice we've had from Sport England as it happens, would just be turned up into a mud bath very, very quickly. The level of activity that we envisage for the site here is a lot less intense. Yet there can be some groups of people going to play an impromptu football match. There'll be dog walkers, joggers, and so on. But the level of intensive usage that would destroy the ground, like I described, I wouldn't expect that to happen. But thanks, Mr. Braidwood.
Thank you. We can therefore move on to item I on the agenda, which is Mr. Lee McDougall to you, Councillor McKinnon.
Yeah, thanks, Leader, and hello again, Mr. McDougall. I think I answered your question about the legal advice before, but I suspect you have another supplementary.
Well, only in that, I guess I would just challenge the point that you haven't had legal advice. I mean, you've made comments about Sport England, which were blatantly untrue, because we've spoken to the head of planning of Sport England that denied the advice they gave was to not play football on a football pitch. So I wonder if the fact you've had legal advice is either correct or actually competent.
Thanks, Mr. McDougall. Of course, I would take issue with the fact that you're saying that I'm not telling the truth. I obviously am. Sport England have given us that informal advice, and I think we have to leave it there.
Sport England must be lying then, I guess.
Thank you both. Can we move on then to our last question from the public, which is item L for Mr. Jason Braidwood.
Thanks, Leader, and hello again, Mr. Braidwood. No such analysis was necessary or indeed carried out. I think it's fairly self-evident from the location of the space and the intention that we have for it that it's fairly likely to be well used. Do you have a supplementary?
No, no supplementary, no.
That concludes our questions from the public, so thank you all for those questions. We can now move on to item 5 on our agenda, which is petitions. I haven't been informed of any petitions, is that correct, Stephen?
That is correct. There are no petitions received.
Thank you. In which case we move to the first main item of this evening's agenda, which is item 6 in your packs, the London Road Development Options Paper. And I believe this is over to you, Councillor McKinnon.
Thank you very much indeed, Leader. Yes, it is. So I'm happy to propose acceptance of the recommendations in this paper, which represent the next steps along the road to the regeneration of the London Road Industrial Estate. In particular, which is proposed that while there will be a holistic overall vision for the final attributes of the regenerated estate, the Council will propose a phased approach to development of the site on a plot-by-plot basis, rather than a comprehensive approach, which would have treated the estate as one site for development purposes. This will be a much lower risk approach for the Council, and with the happy consequence that the use of compulsory purchase orders will be far less likely. The objectives referred to in the recommendations and denoted at 514 in the report states also that financial returns are of equal, not superior, but equal importance to high quality regeneration. 2 budgetary recommendations also appear in the paper, Leader. There's an in-year budget of £45,000 for further feasibility studies and negotiations with estate stakeholders. And then over the next 3 financial years, an annual budget of £100,000 to cover the preparation of a supplementary planning document. And I should point out at this stage that we haven't ruled out the option of a local development order either. You know, the most appropriate vehicle to take this forward is still to be decided, and that really should have been in the report, but I'll make that clear right now. Also, that budget will cover individual plot appraisal, market testing, legal support, environmental advice, and more. So happy to propose those recommendations, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor McKinnon. Does that find a seconder amongst the executive?
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Wilson, would you like to speak to that just now?
Thank you, Leader. The shortly to be renamed London Road Industrial Estate is the prime regeneration site for Newbury. This report, quite rightly in my view, proposes a phased development over the next 10 years, allowing the Council to pick the most appropriate joint venture partners to be selected for different elements of this 25-acre site. The main driver is going to be economic development on this site, which is already largely designated for employment purposes. This is likely to be facilitated by residential development, including significant affordable housing to the Council standards on the southern end of the site. The revenue derived from this will act as a catalyst to enable infrastructure works to allow for commercial development on the larger northern end. The other attraction of a phased development is that it allows the Council to work in partnership with existing occupiers to help relocation over the medium term, allowing the intensification of the current low density uses and creating employment opportunities. I would like to second the proposal to accept this report.
Thank you, Councillor Wollaston. Members of the Executive, is there any questions that you have for Councillor McKinnon? No, I'm not seeing any hands going up. Is there any other questions? Councillor Brooks, I see you waving that finger at me. Is your blue hand not working again?
I refuse to use it until it's yellow. I'm waiting for Zoom to adapt the software. Leader, and through you to Councillor McKinnon, I am concerned about project management. You will recall the task group looked into the previous London Road development and project management was found to be wanting. I note in paragraph 5.13, there will be a dedicated lead project officer. Now, I'd like to know a little bit more what you think a project officer does, Councillor McKinnon. In my book, project officer is like a glorified quantity surveyor who checks what's being spent and what's slipping, but that doesn't actually manage the project. We have an executive director resources as a sponsor, that won't be their dedicated role, and a member lead, that won't be their dedicated role either. So I fear for the robustness of the Council's project management capability, as we found wanting in the past. Can I get any reassurance on this and some confidence that the lead officer is capable of doing whatever the lead officer role is, please?
Councillor McKinnon, would you like to take that?
Yes, of course you can, Councillor Brooks. I won't name the officer in a public meeting. I think that would be unfair, but I have full confidence in him. You know who I'm talking about, and the day-to-day management of the project will lie with that project officer, regardless of job title. Your points about previous project management are not surprising to me, but they're noted. And yes, I give you that assurance that I have full confidence in the officer in charge of the project.
Thank you both. Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Leader. We on the Liberal Democrat benches are very concerned about the lack of clarity over the relationship between the planning side of taking this project forward and the landowner's responsibility, which are set out in this document. I see that producing a supplementary planning document is outlined as something that will be done in the next 6 to 24 months. Can you please provide a little bit more clarity about how this very necessary division of responsibility, the so-called glass wall, will be provided? Because we believe that it's time we had some clear planning policy set down that all parties to the project, future as well as present, can look to. There isn't any at the moment, as was admitted in the Avison Young report. There is no clear planning policy. So how are we going to achieve that while a project encompassing planning, it would seem, is still being led by the council through yourself and its economic development side? It doesn't seem, for a member of the public that we're trying to put ourselves in the shoes of, to be sound, shall I say.
Councillor McKinnon, would you like to answer that, or would you like me to bring Councillor Colin?
I'll have first dibs at that, Leader, and then Councillor Cole may well want to come in herself as well. I don't accept that it's unsigned, Councillor Vickers, and I feel that we've had this conversation before a few times. You know, I'm managing the project, and my portfolio oversees the project from a landowner's point of view, and that's perfectly proper. Now I've just gone through the paper which tells us that we're going to be preparing that supplementary planning document and considering the planning. The planning factors associated with this project, that's beginning to kick off now, that work. So again, I would put it to him that he's asking me for things that haven't happened yet, and they shouldn't have happened yet. And I'm very much looking at things from a landowner's point of view. It's very important that the separation of the council's interests as landowner and as local planning authority not only exists, but is seen to exist. So you know, for what it's worth, I give him my assurance that that will continue to be the case. I don't know if Councillor Cole would like to add anything.
Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Leader. There are two statements in the local plan review, Councillor Vickers, which I'm sure you've probably read. The supporting text to SP20, strategic approach to economic development and hierarchy of centres, at paragraph 7.6 states, the London Road Industrial Estate is an edge of centre designated employment area, which has scope for comprehensive regeneration within the planned period to maximise the potential of the site. Office development may be appropriate in that context. And there's additional supporting text to DC 31, designated employment areas, at paragraph 12.7. In addition, the London Road Industrial Estate has scope for comprehensive regeneration within the planned period to maximise the potential of the site. Some mixed-use development may be appropriate in the context, such that no net loss of employment floor space results from that development. Councillor Vickers, as a member of the Planning Advisory Group and a person who purports to have a good, sound knowledge of planning, which I don't dispute, you should be fully aware that the council has to operate as the local planning authority and as a landowner, and those divisions are quite clear and quite definite. The local plan review is out for consultation at the moment, and more work once the responses to the consultation have been analysed will be done to expand the comments that are already made in the consultation document. And the Planning Advisory Group, of which you are a member, will be involved in formulating those policies. Thank you, Leader.
Can I come back, Leader?
Thank you, Councillor.
Quite clear, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Cole.
Can I come back on that, Leader? Just, we have in the actual, we're talking about the people involved. The current project manager, I don't want to give names, comes under an economic development officer who comes under the head of planning and development. That of itself seems to show that there is a problem here. When is the head of planning and development looking at it as a planner, and when is he looking at it as the line manager of the economic development officer? Can that be changed? And then it would be actually a little bit clearer to those outside.
Thank you for your thoughts. Do you want to come back on that, Councillor McKinnon?
Not at this stage, Leader. I mean, the organisation chart is what it is. I've got full faith in our officers to be able to handle those dual responsibilities.
Thank you.
Sure
Councillor Pattenden. Sorry, Councillor Vickers, I don't think that was a very respectful mark with regards to our officers, and I feel it's unjust for people to make those types of comments in this meeting. Councillor Pattenden.
Thank you very much, Leader. I was wondering, given the amount of Councillor McKinnon's very valuable time that gets used up answering questions about the fate of football provision in London Road, whether you felt that this report could potentially have done more to, I don't know, somehow pacify those concerns and address the needs of the people that are asking you these questions and have been doing on a very, very regular basis, because they haven't yet found any satisfaction in what you've been saying.
Councillor McKinnon.
Well, thanks, Councillor Pattenden, for your concern about my time. I'm, of course, always happy to answer public questions of any stripe. That's not a problem. And really, the future development of the estate, I think I've mentioned this a few times now, and the future provision of football ground are now two separate beasts. The future football provision, I think Mr. Morgan, one of our public questioners earlier on, mentioned it. We're hoping to make that announcement very, very shortly indeed. And from that point on, the future of London Road and the future of football in the district can follow two separate paths.
Thank you. Councillor Abbs.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I guess I keep listening to the headlong charge on the LRIE, and I must admit to myself, I have a sense of trepidation. COVID has taught us quite a lot this year, none of it very good. But the thing is that we don't really actually know what's going to happen. And as things start to develop over this next year, we probably won't know. And yet, Mr. McKinnon just said that we're already committed to spending another £340,000 over the next few years on this. Have we really so blinkered that we're not thinking even about taking a pause here, finding out where some of the chips? If it's a valuable asset to us as a council, it will continue to be a valuable asset to us as a council. However, what I do know for sure is when we start to make a move, we will disrupt business that's going on there already, as we disrupted the football, and we might get some housing and so on and so on. It's becoming very much a wash to me as to where the community value is and where the real community value is, the value is of this development, considering we're spending more and more and more money on it. Can we not at least have a look at pausing this thing for a while?
Councillor McKinnon.
Thanks, Leader. That sounds awfully like a policy change from the Liberal Democrats to me, who've always assured me that they're fully supportive of the regeneration of this project. I don't accept it's been a headlong charge. I've just talked about a budget over the next 3 years, where these decisions, these appraisals of the precise mix of amenities, office and housing can be made. So no, I really wouldn't accept many of the submissions that Councillor Abbs just made there.
Thank you. Councillor Culver.
Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to point out that Councillor Masters has got his hand raised.
I was going there. I take everybody in the room first, Councillor Culver. That's the process that we go through, and then I go to attendees. Any other questions in the room? No, in which case we have got Councillor Masters with his hand up. Can we bring Councillor Masters into the room for us, please, Phil?
Yeah, I'm just doing that now, Leader.
Thank you. Councillor Masters.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, just an observation. I was really encouraged to see that the Lib Democrats had been included as representatives of the opposition groups on the LRIE. I was less encouraged when quite wrongly I felt that they were admonished in a very schoolmasterly way for having the temerity to put out a statement of their own. Does participation and cooperation disqualify opposition groups from public, disagreements on policy and direction?
I'll take that one because I'm not sure if Councillor Masters knows the process here. The inclusion of any project board is a privilege and the gift of the administration, Councillor Masters. There's no onus on the board to provide information of any nature ahead of publication to the executive agenda.
Well, but so does that preclude? That doesn't answer my question. Does that preclude parties putting out their opinions and policies?
It does not preclude anybody stating an opinion.
All right.
Thank you.
It's a little bit, draconian to punish them in that manner, though.
I'm happy to answer that point.
No, I don't think so, because we've actually got a question from Councillor Dillon coming up to this. So I'm interested in the debate here is actually on a paper in front of you this evening, and there's a clear set of recommendations, and they've been put before you this evening. We've given everybody the opportunity to have a question about the actual paper. The recommendations of that paper are laid out in section 2, 2.1 and 2.2. I don't intend to read them all out, Shiraz. There's quite a number of them, but I will. We have a proposer, we have a seconder, and I will ask that the executive members vote by raising their actual hand if they're in favour of the proposal to approve these recommendations this evening.
Thank you, Leader. I can confirm and declare that the recommendations have been carried. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. We can now move on to item 7 on our agenda, which is the approval to adopt a revised housing allocation policy. And this is over to you, Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Leader. The housing allocations policy explains the framework that we will use to decide how we allocate our social and affordable rent homes in West Berkshire and what our priorities are in doing so. It replaces the complex points-based system with a more easily understood banding system. The policy sets out the principles of the housing allocation scheme and explains who is eligible to apply to be on the Common Housing Register, and these rules are set nationally and cover things like immigration status, who qualifies to be on the Common Housing Register, and we set these rules locally, and we will be closing the register to individuals who do not live in West Berkshire. It also covers how applications will be assessed for housing need and how the bidding process works for available homes. The policy also covers the reasons why someone's application will be deferred, hibernated, suspended, cancelled or removed from the Common Housing Register. The circumstances in which applicants can request a review of a decision about their application, as well as details of how an applicant can make a complaint. I'm pleased to note that we're giving additional priority to key workers and members of the armed forces. I'd like to thank the officers for their work in preparing the policy. It was long overdue. The last policy was published in October 2012, so and things have changed considerably legislation-wise since that time. And I commend it to the executive and propose its adoption. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Cole. Executive members, does this report find a seconder here this evening? Councillor Ardwater, I believed you were seconding this report.
So sorry, Leader, I've completely caught out there. Yes, I am seconding.
Okay, thank you. Members of the executive, do you have any questions for Councillor Cole with regards to this report? No, in which case I'll go to Councillor Culver.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Councillor Cole. I understand from an answer you gave to a public question back in November that we've got 861 people who currently qualify for social housing. And I was just wondering if you know roughly how many of those people would qualify for each of the new bands that you've got in your paper?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Culver. Currently, we have 816 people on the Common Housing Register who qualify. I can't give you the information about who qualifies for which bands. I haven't got that breakdown in front of me, but I would be happy for the housing team to provide that information to you.
Great, thank you very much, Councillor Colin. Just a second question. The bands, £60,000 and £44,000 for qualifying. How did those figures arise? Where did those figures come from?
I can't answer that question. That's a technical one from officers, but again, I can get you the answer. Okay. I would suspect it's down to research that officers have done. They were very, very thorough in preparing this this policy.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Culver. Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Leader. I'd like to join Councillor Colin in congratulating the officers who've prepared this. It is long overdue. There are a lot of good improvements in it. It doesn't deal with the underlying problem of a severe shortage of social housing, but I know we're doing what we can, and a lot of the problems are down to national policy and the way that the market, the housing market is operating, or rather failing to operate in a way the market should, i.e. supply meeting demand, which is not the case with housing these days. My question is, I note that there is a proviso in the paper saying that the system won't come in until software is installed and operating. So when will that be? When is it likely we can move onto this new system?
Councillor Cole?
Thank you, Councillor Vickers. The software is currently in the process of being installed and tested. So we are anticipating that this would come into force as early as possible in the new year. We've made some great strides forward in getting suitable software for the housing team.
Thank you. Councillor Masters.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your submission. I know how hard many of the officers have been working on this, including, especially on the provision to look after the rough sleepers. So, Councillor Cole, if you can pass my gratitude to the officers on that, that would be most welcome. Thank you. I know they've done a great job. I just note that in the strategy document, page 22, there's an acknowledgement that the private sector needs to be approached, because with the demand for social housing and the lack of social housing stock, causes some affordability challenges. Is it not the time for the council to not necessarily rely on the goodwill and the private sector to do the right thing, and maybe grasp the nettle and look at providing its own housing stock in some provision? It's not going to happen overnight. I know there's a number of people on the list that you can get back to my colleague Councillor Culver with, but this is it gets to the very heart of everything that the council needs to do in terms of economic development, well-being, and everything that cuts across. Is it not time to look at it? And the LRIE would be a great opportunity to be involved in that, rather than again waiting for the private sector to do the right thing.
Councillor Cole.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Masters. I'll certainly pass your thanks on to the housing team, and I'm pleased that you do appreciate the amount of hard work and effort that this outstandingly good team put in on behalf of the residents of West Berkshire. As you're aware, we handed over our own housing stock to Sovereign Housing Association. I think it was in 1988. So we have no standard housing stock. We are constantly looking and reviewing ways in which we can improve social housing. and certainly the council's landowners can look at provision of social housing as and when sites come forward that is on our land. So should housing occur on London Road Industrial Estate, then I'm sure the provision of social and affordable housing will be one of the considerations that we look at when we are putting plans forward.
Thank you, Councillor Cole.
Can I follow up on that, please, Leader?
You may.
Would you give a commitment that you will do a full costing of the benefits of in-house construction management against the merits of cajoling the private sector?
Well, Councillor Masters, you must be aware that we're actually doing a joint venture with Sovereign Housing to, in a small way, to look at providing affordable housing. We've got 2 small schemes at the moment, which we would hope to expand, and there are other methods of looking at provision of housing, including setting up a housing company. So we are exploring all avenues, but we don't want to race into something without really thoroughly examining.
I'm not asking you to rush into it. I think if it was a proper comparison between the merits of on the financial and the social impact side, I think council would probably be very welcoming of that.
Well, as I've said, Councillor Masters, we are looking at we're exploring all angles.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
At the moment, I can't say any more because everything is, apart from the joint venture, other things are at a very early stage. But I would hope that when the time is appropriate, then I'll be able to come and speak to you all about it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you both. So we have a recommendation before us this evening that the revised housing allocation policy, as set out at Appendix A, be adopted and fully implemented when the Housing Department's ICT allocation system is deployed. Can I ask executive members to vote by raising their actual hand if they are in favour of the proposal to approve the recommendation this evening?
Thank you, Leader. I can declare that the recommendation has been approved.
Thank you, Shiraz. Can we move to item 8 on your agendas then tonight, which is the response to the local electricity bill motion? Councillor Ardwater, I believe this is your report.
Yes, thank you, Leader.
Does it find a seconder before I let you go? It does. Thank you, Councillor Sumner. Okay, back to you, Councillor Ardwater.
Thank you again, Leader. Yes, so as members will recall, we actually tabled 2 motions in full council in support of this bill, one proposed by Councillor Abbs in March and one by myself in September. In Parliament, I'm very happy to say that the total council is very unanimously in favour of this. The Environmental Advisory Group was very supportive, and as are at least two of our 3 MPs. Alok Sharma, as members will know, being a member of the government, is somewhat constrained in supporting a private member's bill. So this report simply has gone into a bit more detail than we were able to, and has pointed out some ways in which the drafting of the bill can be improved, in particular, for example, to encourage and show greater direction towards explicitly green energy rather than just local energy. And the recommendation broadly is to recommend to our MPs, all 3 of our MPs, that we, West Berkshire Council, support this very sensible change to the law, and we look forward to it progressing through Parliament in the early part of next year. So again, we're all supportive. I trust this is a good thing to do, and again, I look forward to members' full support.
Thank you, Councillor Ardwater. Councillor Sumner, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
Only to say that I'm happy to support the proposal, Leader. As Councillor Ardwater said, there's clearly some cross-party agreement on this, it being having raised by 2 different parties and eventually coming to the same conclusion. So with the caveats that were laid down, I'm absolutely happy to second.
Okay, thank you both. Members of the executive, any questions for Councillor Ardwater? No. Members opposite, any questions for Councillor Arderwater? Councillor Vickers.
Oh, wait a minute. Yes, I am unmuted. Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I think that unfortunately that we're conditional in our answer, but the question is, I mean, are members opposite aware that most of the smaller companies that are trying to get into this field through what would be achieved by the bill, they are indeed suppliers of renewable energy. So it's slightly nitpicking. I sort of feel that we're making it conditional on there being explicit mention of renewable energy in this. I mean, I hope it can be achieved, this amendment to the bill, but it'd be a shame if it fell just because of that, because I think the majority of the companies that would be formed would be promoting renewable energy.
Councillor Arderwater.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Vickers. And yes, it's a very good point that the great majority of companies are in the renewables sector. I do know, though, as a member for Thatcham, there was a couple of years ago a proposal by a company to place lots of diesel generators in the woods between Bucklebury and Thatcham, and that market is still frothy. Now, yes, there's a place and a need for emergency power supplies to come in, but the purpose of this bill is to empower organisations, including potentially ourselves, but definitely smaller companies, to supply renewably generated electricity, hence the recommended tweaks to the wording, for local users without the huge cost and commitments needed under current legislation. So it's certainly not a half-hearted support. I think a very well-directed attempt to improve drafting. But no, we are totally in support of the principle behind the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. And we've got Councillor Abs.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, obviously, yeah, I'm very pleased to see this come through because I proposed it initially. I suppose the only slight disappointment I had is taken us 10 months to go this, and really it should have been a 1-month exercise. So whereas I'm absolutely in favour of it, I really love us to find ways of doing these things a little bit faster when it's got cross-party agreement, which this one did. But thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Abs. It's certainly been an interesting 10 months that we've all been going through. Okay, members, you have in front of you the recommendations that the council supports the local electricity bill, but that this support is contingent on the resolution of issues identified in the APSE energy report attached at Appendix B, that the issues identified within the existing draft of the bill are brought to the attention of our local MPs so that they can potentially be addressed as the bill progresses through Parliament. Please can executive members vote by raising their actual hand in favour of the proposals to approve the recommendations.
Thank you very much, Leader. The recommendations have been, I declare that the recommendations have been approved.
Thank you, Shiraz. We can therefore move on to item 9 on this evening's agenda, which is the Safer Schools motion. And I believe this is over to you, Councillor Sumner.
It is, Leader. I'm happy to propose the motion.
And does that find a seconder?
Yes, Leader, I'm happy to second.
Thank you. Back to you, Councillor Sumner.
Thank you, Leader. And I will thank Councillor Pattenden for his initial raising of the motion and the items within it. I'd also like to thank very much officers for bringing this report back to us. This report has taken some time to complete. It's also taken some considerable resource to complete, and that in the main is due to the amount of things that were included within it. The outcome of that, in all honesty, was that it was best for us as an organisation to commission an independent report through WSP. That report has been brought back to members and discussed via TAG. And again, I'd thank Councillor Pattenden for taking time to come to TAG and discuss it with us. I think that was absolutely vital. Although there was some concern about the report being defensive, I actually think the report is factual. I think it's honest, and it does identify things that, as an authority, we have done and that we do. And I would say that there are some things at the back of that that we will now be focusing on to make sure that our education bodies are fully aware of the resources that they can tap into, and that we're fully aware of the areas that we may be able to continue that support or increase that support if it's necessary. I'm content with the recommendations that have been laid out, Leader, and I'm happy to propose the report on that basis. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sumner. Members of the Executive, is there any particular questions that you have for Councillor Sumner? And Councillor Ardwater, is there anything you'd like to add?
So, Leader, thank you again. Councillor Sumner has very fully covered the ground here. I would just like to chip in with the point that while this is a very welcome motion, and again, I'm glad to see a very thorough response. This is a very complex area, and while I think everybody is in full agreement with the spirit and the gist behind Councillor Patterton's motion, it overlaps with many other issues, in particular traffic congestion around schools, which is certainly in the one in my ward is a big issue. The conflict between parents who pre-COVID were having to or were in many cases dropping off children by car before driving to work, and again the road safety and so forth, the issues combined with that. So it is a complex issue. We're tackling it in a thorough and methodological way, and again I look forward to results from both this and follow-on work that's being taken place. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ardwater. Members opposite, is there any particular questions you have for Councillor Sumner? Councillor Patterton.
Thanks very much, Leader. I think the issue we have now is that even though, you know, a number of these things that a number of the things proposed in the motion are already in progress, or maybe in progress in future, the issue that I think I'd be interested in knowing how you approach is the point of this motion was that it brought all of those things under the umbrella of safer schools. Now, if you're already doing some of those things in other disparate areas of the council, that focus of a safer school doesn't exist. So I'm wondering how you feel you may be able to provide that focus to the initiatives that are already underway.
Thank you, Councillor Patterton. I understand what you're saying, but I would counter it to say that I don't like the word disparate. I don't believe it is disparate. I believe what we've got is a programme of works through the department that reach out and work with other departments. That doesn't mean it's disparate. We continue to work with the education team, and Councillor Burke and myself are fully prepared to engage in conversation where we might need to. What we've got is a situation where those things that we do aren't necessarily just for the benefit of schools, and I think that's important. I think if we were to focus on one area specifically, we may well lose sight of the need in other areas, and that would be remiss of us to make sure that safety applies to everybody. We need to make sure that we're doing everything we can across the district and for all areas, and schools is part of that. It's an important part of that, but it is only a part of it. If we can gain traction by making sure that something can be done across the patch, then surely that's the better approach to take. Some of the things that have been noted, I mean, in current climate, you would question the benefit of suggesting that car sharing was an option, for example, for schools. Mixing families together to get them to school isn't best practice at the moment. So we do need to be careful with what we're trying to achieve. We need to be careful that we can adapt. But part of that, for me, also comes from being able to provide that resource or that methodology across the wider area.
Thank you, Councillor Sumner. Councillor Abbs.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I'd just like to give Councillor Sumner an example of how disparate does play within the council when the two departments aren't talking to each other. So if I take Highway Copse and the school that's being built as one example, and Market Street and its solar project, there's no obvious connection except for solar was needed at Highway Copse and was put and solar was replaced at Market Street. Those two departments not talking to each other led to a less efficient outcome. So there are examples, and the bringing it under one umbrella means that you avoid this kind of disparate activity. But anyway, you were struggling to find an example, but there's one.
Oh, I was looking at examples within transport, in all honesty. The example that you've quoted clearly isn't, but thank you for bringing it to my attention.
Okay, can I remind members that we're discussing item 9, which is the motion around the safer schools. So can we keep the focus on this particular motion at this point, please? Councillor Vickers.
Yes, coming back to that, I mean, I was very much drawn, I forget what the paragraph number is, but mention of this, as Councillor Patterson said, this has a safer schools focus, and there used to be a dedicated officer resource to just that, working with the schools. I do wish that would come back. I mean, but I also agree with Councillor Sumner in that the last 9 months has been very, very difficult to make progress on this. The schools have been run ragged through COVID. They've got to just keep the show on the road, and one can quite understand why this has not been able to be given priority by schools. But I do hope that going forward, it might be possible through budget reviews, but especially in the light of the government from the top down saying we must promote active travel. Starting with schools is the best place to start, because you build habits of a lifetime into the idea that the way to go from home to work is with your own 2 feet, whether it's walking or cycling. And schools need help, because each individual school's in a different environment, different situations. But if we could only get a dedicated officer who is totally focused on that, on bringing together that holistic way of thinking, school by school, with the necessary support from Highways colleagues, that would achieve so much, as it did 10 or 12 years ago when we had Coral Taylor. I remember her name very well because she was so good at the work. So glad that we are doing a little bit, and I'm not at all critical of what may have failed to have been done the last 9 months, because gosh, there's so much more important that had to be done. But please, when we come out of COVID, let's give this a bit of a high priority. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vickers. Councillor Sumner, I was going to say, do you want to come back on that before we move to the recommendations?
Yeah, happy to that, and thank you for the comments, Councillor Vickers. I think the page you're referring to is 134, and the officer's statement, and this was comments that were taken from TAG. The officer's statement at that point was that meetings and conversations, discussion generally needs to take place between public health and education officers, and that's absolutely correct. And I think that then achieves what everybody has been talking about in their questions to me. I'm happy to commit to doing that. As I said, I'm in conversation with Councillor Bowick on a fairly regular basis, and we can make sure that those conversations are taking place and that things are being done in the best way.
Okay, thank you all. So members, we've got the recommendation. I don't intend to read them all out. They're clearly listed there in your papers. It's section 2, 2.1 through to 2.6. Please can executive members vote by raising their actual hand if they're in favour of the proposals to approve the recommendations.
Thank you, Leader. I declare that the recommendations have been approved.
Thank you, Shiraz. We can therefore move on to item 10 on our agenda this evening, which is the Newbury Town Centre pedestrianisation. I believe this is back to you, Councillor Sumner.
Indeed it is, Leader, and I'm happy to propose the report to the motion.
And does that find a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Arderwater. Councillor Sumner, back to you.
Thank you, Leader. I don't know that Councillor Masters is actually with us tonight, but I'll thank him in his absence for raising the motion. This has been a difficult one to work through again. As a statement, as a proposal, it's been discussed in detail at the October tag again, and I thank Councillor Masters for his contribution during that. I think it's fair to say that the position of the authority of officers and my position on this has been consistent throughout, whether it's in response to the questions or to press articles or in general debate. This was originally a temporary measure under exceptional circumstances, and whilst popular and supported by some, it was equally slated and disliked by others. And I think we've all seen that in press releases, in social media. It hasn't found wholesale support in one direction. Whether it's individual members of the public, whether it was businesses in the area, or whether it was businesses that travel through or use us to travel through as part of their standard working day. I'm sort of referring to the taxi companies and the likes. As I say, there was no heavily weighted position one way or the other. This isn't new as a topic, and the report references historical debate and documentation that took place some years ago for the benefit of coming to the conclusions and the reasons that those conclusions were reached. It is long-standing debate, and it's regardless of who proposed it and who took the debate forward. It's important to remind members of the engagement of the key stakeholders that took place originally and throughout the temporary measure. And this will continue to be the case as the study of the town centre takes place. I think it's also important to remind members of the need for full consultation for any permanent measure to be enacted, should that be the outcome. And I can't stress that heavily enough. For these changes that are being discussed and being requested to be made, full consultation will need to be part of that process. That's what's happened before. That's where we will be again. There is still a great concern that removing traffic from one of our routes will merely increase it in others. And that is something that I think we will probably need to do new studies for and come up with new figures to take into the debate again if it comes out of the town centre work that's going on. But I'm again content with the information that's been put into the recommendations, with the conversation that's taken place, and I'm happy to propose the recommendations as detailed in section 2, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Sumner. Members of the executive, is there any questions that you've got for Councillor Sumner? No, in which case I look opposite and I can see Councillor Culver, you've got your hand up.
Thank you, Leader. I just want to say thank you to Councillor Sumner on behalf of David, who isn't able to be here tonight because he's unwell, unfortunately. We welcome the fact that the pedestrianisation, the full pedestrianisation in the long-term option is actually part of the paper. And as we've discussed before, we think it's really important from the point of view of helping to meet the objectives of the climate emergency, the environment strategy, reducing pollution, and so on. And obviously it would help with social distancing at the moment. And bearing in mind the economic crisis that we've got, we also think it could make an important contribution to helping to solve that if people are able to go shopping knowing that they're not going to have to dodge traffic. I think we're very lucky that we've got such a lovely town centre. There are many others that are probably not as nice as Newbury, but actually have full pedestrianisation. So I think it would be a great asset if we could fully pedestrianise that in the future and make the town centre an even nicer place to be. But again, thank you very much to Councillor Sumner for listening to our concerns on this.
Thank you. And my best wishes to Councillor Marsh.
Okay, members, you have recommendations laid out before you again, 2.1 through to 2.5. Can I see if members of the executive please vote by raising their actual hand if they're in favour of the proposals to approve the above recommendations.
Thank you, Leader. I declare that the recommendations have been approved.
Thank you, everybody. We can now move on to item 11 on this evening's agenda, which is the performance report for Q2. Councillor Sumner, I believe you're introducing this report.
Don't believe I am, Leader. I think it may be Councillor Stewart.
Oh, sorry, I'm reading the previous one. So, Councillor Stewart, apologies.
Quite all right, Leader. Do we need to find a seconder before?
Well, I was just, if you're happy to propose it, I'm
okay.
going to ask for a seconder. So,
yes, I'm happy to propose it.
Does this report find a seconder? Councillor Cole, I believe you were seconding this report. Okay, thank you, Councillor Cole. Back to you, Councillor Stewart.
Thank you. So thank you, Leader. As you would expect, this has been another challenging quarter, including the lead up to a second lockdown period, which has again been very difficult for our local businesses and our residents alike. I don't intend to walk everyone through the full pack. It's one of those ones where we have lots of charts and graphs, and everybody's had the opportunity to read through it. But I will highlight a few areas. Also to note for this report, members should see links to some of the items mentioned should you wish to get more information from the sources that we used. One of the most notable areas has been the continuing rise in numbers of benefits claimants, and in particular in terms of our young people aged 16 to 24. So we're really pleased that West Berks Council has been able to fully support the Kickstart scheme and act as a gateway for local businesses in order to help our young people get back into the workplace. We have actually to date submitted 2 applications, which totals, I believe, 70 roles, and that includes hopefully 13 posts within the council itself, which is great news. And we will continue to be submitting further applications, hopefully the next one in January. And in terms of local businesses, our teams, as you can probably imagine, have been extremely busy in distributing the huge number of grants during this period by working through all of the applications, understanding the criteria, ensuring grant funding is being allocated accurately and swiftly, more importantly, to those who qualify. The exception reports in Appendix B, unsurprisingly, show that the 2 measures for collections in terms of council tax and non-domestic rates are amber and red respectively at the moment. And that's following the actions we took as a council to ease, where possible, the financial burdens on our residents during lockdown, and by pausing in terms of council tax and collection of business rates. As I understand it, some of this deficit may be covered, may be recovered by central government, which we're waiting to hear back on at the moment. And also this report recommends a number of new measures to be approved by executive, ensuring that we have continual improvement. So where other measures have been achieved, as requested by OSMC, we're ensuring that we continue to add new measures to make sure that we are always striving to improve. You can see these in Appendix D, although unfortunately the report indicates it as Appendix E, so my apologies for that. Just quickly to mention what those are, 2 of these are with regards to befriending in West Berks Council under the health and wellbeing portfolio, and 3 are with regards to some key activities delivering reports and pieces of work under the finance and economic development portfolio. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Before I go over to members of the executive, I'll just take chairman's prerogative here. I had the fortune of speaking this morning to managers across West Berkshire, and I just wanted to publicly say about our thanks towards all of the officers here in West Berkshire Council, because I think actually when you review this report and you see the strong progress and achievements despite the challenges and constraints of the last few months, it's really worthwhile noting that that is down to the officers of West Berkshire Council and their efforts to make sure that the services have continued as normal. So on behalf of all of the executive, I'd like to formally thank every single officer in West Berkshire Council for their outstanding efforts as far as this is concerned. So I just thought I'd take chairman's privilege there. But members of the executive, has anybody got any other points that they would like to highlight or questions they have for Councillor Stewart? Councillor Bridgman.
Not a question, just a comment that obviously a huge number of the key performance indicators in the report, reflected in the report, the performance indicators of the council, have been thrown into disarray by COVID. And we won't know where we are until we're at the back end of this pandemic and things have settled. So I think we all have to read this report in that light. And that's, I mean, and that's no less the case for adult social care, you know, the impact of COVID on adult social care and as reflected on some of these numbers, and the fact that, for example, CQC has effectively suspended operation, meant that where we did have plans to improve things, even if those things have improved, they won't have been retested. And we're still where we are, and we have been for a very long time because the CQC hasn't come in again. That's really just the comment. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Bridgman. Members of the Executive, any other questions? In which case, I'll go across the opposition. Do you have any questions with regards to the performance report for Q2? Okay, I don't see any other hands going up, and therefore the recommendations are before you in 2.1, 2.2 and 2.3. Please can executive members vote by raising their actual hand if they're in favour of the proposal to approve the recommendations.
Thank you, Leader. I can confirm that the recommendation has been carried. With 2.3, there was a correction to Appendix D. That's just for noted for
with that amendment, we're happy to approve. Thank you, Shiraz. In which case we can move to item 12 on this evening's agenda, and this is the revenue financial performance for Q2. And I believe this is being proposed by Councillor McKinnon. Are you proposing this report this evening?
Yes, happy, Leader.
And I'm very happy to second this from the chair. So over to you, Councillor McKinnon.
Thank you very much, Leader. So this is to report the latest, as at the end of Q2, revenue budget forecast for the 2020-21 financial year. Firstly, an apology to members. I've discovered that the table on page 255 of this report contains two errors in the second column, the net forecast column for people and for capital financing. Unfortunately, they've not been updated from Q1. So those figures in that column are showing the Q1 forecast for those directorates. Now, that shouldn't affect our discussions this evening. The over and underspend figures for all directorates and the total are correct, and there are movements from Q1. So that's where I would expect our focus to be this evening. But apologies for that, members, and I'll ensure that the corrected table is circulated to you all in the morning. The Q2 forecast is for a year-end underspend of £1.5 million. Q1, the forecast year-end position was an underspend of just under 600,000. So you can see the forecast underspend has increased by around £900,000. This is almost entirely from the People Directorate. Adult social care, the forecast underspend is now £1 million, up from 600,000 last quarter. Again, sadly, deaths are higher than the equivalent period last year, although we do expect an increase in demand on the service in the second half of the year from clients in step-down placements requiring longer-term services. Children and Family Services has continued to see a fall in clients requiring placements, in particular unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. That's been noticeably less demand in the service from there during the COVID period. Perhaps that's unsurprising given the reduction in road transport. It remains to be seen whether the drop in clients is temporary due to the pandemic or will bounce back afterwards, but we monitor the situation closely. Education services are now forecasting a £200,000 underspend, arising from savings from home to school transport, external funding being received, and also successful trading income. So a more obviously positive picture here. Now, clearly the total underspend forecast will inform the budget setting process and of course decisions on council tax and the adult social care precept for 21-22. It should be noted that it doesn't necessarily follow that the underspend this year will automatically transfer to next year, particularly for services whose costs are so demand-led, like adult social care and the like. But we will be carefully considering the impact for next year's budget, although I can't give any firm commitments at this stage, as you might expect, until we've considered expected continued COVID funding from central government and also fully appraised the impact of the local government settlement, which was only announced earlier today. Thanks, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor McKinnon. Councillor Bridgman, you've put your hand up.
Yeah, just to reflect, Leader, Councillor McKinnon has obviously referred us to the underspend in adult social care. And just to reflect, one element of that is that the CCG picked up the bill for hospital discharge for a period of about 6 months. That period has come to an end. And there are a number of individuals who are in what we call step-down beds. So they've come out of hospital and they are in a like a holding area for a decision to be made about their long-term care. Now, they may well come onto our books for long-term service provision, and therefore the adult social care model shows quite a steep rise in demand in the long-term service provision, partly because of those individuals who are currently, haven't been paid for by us, because of the need to discharge people from hospital in order to clear the decks for COVID. So that is just one aspect of COVID, that it's not purely the very regrettable number of deaths we've had, but there are other factors in the adult social care number which will work their way through as we go forward. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Bridgman. Members of the Executive, is there any other questions you have for Councillor McKinnon? Don't see any hands going up, so I'm going to go across to Councillor Brooks.
Who used the right hand this time.
Well done.
Yeah. Through you then to Councillor McKinnon. The movement in the underspend from 600k, as you kindly pointed out, to 1.5 million is, of course, 150% movement. And I'm particularly watching forecasts this year because we ought to be doing better. That's a lot of movement in 13 weeks. So I do understand the volatility this year. I do understand the tragic circumstances in which adult social care is bringing home this forecast underspend. But I am looking, and I hope he will work on getting these forecasts to be tighter in their movement quarter on quarter. That's one question for him. And the other one is, there will be a risk reserve for adult social care. If that is not needed because of these underspends, can he tell us what that will release potentially to the underspend to be rolled over possibly? I know that decision won't be made at the moment, but it means any underspend would then be topped up by the lack of use of those risk reserves. So a bit of clarity on both points, please, Leader.
Councillor McKinnon.
Yeah, thanks, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Brooks. Yeah, on your point about the movement, I mean, you're quite right in the numbers. So it's a big jump from quarter 1 to quarter 2. Your point about forecasting and being on top of the costs and the modelling, I think that's fine. I agree with you. Yes, we are continually looking at that model. We're trying to improve it, and I think we're in quite a good place with it. I think what I would say is that what we're measuring here is the underspend against the original budget, which was set back in March. And that's set, that's not moving. So we made the decisions back in March. I appreciate the point that you made, and that's generous of you to say. It was a whole different ballgame back then. So yes, of course, as this most unusual of years unwinds, then you see that large and diverging movement from the budget. So we're not necessarily disagreeing with each other there. I'm part of obviously the budget board discussions where we look closely at this ASC model. It's not just all about ASC, of course, but I can assure you that the model is scrutinised on a regular basis. On the second point, I'm not in a position to talk about what happens to the risk reserve right now, as I don't think you'll be too surprised. I said, monitoring the demand for ASC, we're expecting a bounce back in demand in the second half. So really that decision will be made closer to the budget setting process and the budget in March. But watch this space, I would say, Councillor Brooks.
Can I just check what that reserve is in adult social care? Because I think it's normally around the 900k mark.
I'll need to confirm to him in the morning on that one. I don't have that figure to hand.
Okay, thank you, everybody. So, members, the recommendation for this report is to note the report, and we don't actually require a vote on this evening, but to note quarter 2 forecast of a 1.5 underspend. So we can move on, therefore, to item 13 on our agenda this evening, which is the capital financial performance quarter 2 report. Before we do so, but just before we do so, Councillor Brooks, I know you're very attached to that blue hand now, but is that up for a reason, or is it an old hand?
That's not very nice to call my hands old, but you're not technically wrong, and I will lower it now.
Thank you. I wasn't sure if I'd missed something, so thank you for that, Councillor Brooks. Over to you, Councillor McKinnon.
Thanks, Leader. Happy to propose this report.
And I'm happy to second this report from the chair.
And thanks, Leader. And if I may, through the wonders of looking things up very quickly and being helped by officers, I can tell Councillor Brooks that the reserve is 815,000, so he was not far off with his 900,000 effort. Well done. Anyway, on to capital. This is to report the latest, again, as at the end of quarter 2, forecast year-end performance of the capital expenditure against the capital budget for 2021, and also to note the latest reprofiling of expenditure into future years. So the budget, again, the original budget, 56 million, the forecast underspend by year end is now 12 million against that budget. The position at Q1, the forecast was 6 million. So again, you've got a 100% increase, a £6 million increase in the forecast underspend. Of course, delays to the capital programme this year are not surprising given the pandemic situation. Planned maintenance and transport projects continue to be affected and delayed by COVID. Additionally, the Development and Planning Service have suffered a delay to the refurbishment of the site at Four Houses Corner. Furthermore, a number of ICT projects have been paused while the review of the Council's office accommodation is completed, which of course I think members would agree is a sensible way to proceed. There is a delay to the delivery of the last stage of the superfast broadband infrastructure. That project is virtually complete and we're down to the final stages, which of course are the most difficult and challenging. And I would say finally here, Leader, that although only 7 million of the 12 million underspend has been noted as being reprofiled to future years, that relates only to projects where that decision has been formally made. And I would expect the vast majority, if not all, of these delayed projects to be reprofiled into 21-22. Thanks, Leader.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McKinnon. Members of the Executive, do you have any questions for Councillor McKinnon? In which case, does any member of the opposition have any questions? No, in which case the recommendation, there's no recommendations, but members are asked to note the forecast financial position as of Q2 and the proposed reprofiling of expenditure for 2021, 21-22. So thank you, everybody. And moving swiftly forward then, we can get to item 14 on this evening's agenda, which is a Treasury Management Mid-Term Report. Back to you, Councillor McKinnon.
Thank you very much, Leader, and delighted to propose this report.
And I'll make it a hat trick and second it from the chair.
Excellent, thank you. So we want the Executive to note the Council's investments and borrowings during the first 6 months of the 2021 financial year. Let me deal with borrowing first of all. The opening capital financing requirement back in March was £239 million. As at 30th September, the Council held 221.8 million of loans. That was up from 219.3, so just 2.5 million. As at the 31st of March. During the period, PWLB rates remained at higher than usual levels, as has been noted before in Executive and Council. During the period, we also were in the happy position of launching a community municipal investment, the first of its kind in the UK. That was launched back in July. The intention was to raise up to £1 million for environmental projects. Now, the report is at the end of September, which is why we talk about it having raised 785,000 at that date. Of course, subsequently, we know that it was fully subscribed earlier than its closing date, which was a great success. On the investment sides, the Council continues to hold cash balances with UK banks and building societies, other local authorities and the UK government, and AAA rated money market funds. Individual counterparty limits of a maximum of 5 million exist for those counterparties, except for UK gilts, which I'm sure is understood has an unlimited counterparty limit, being the closest thing you can get in the world to a risk-free investment. That's it, Leader. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor McKinnon. The report is to note only, sorry, Councillor Brooks, do you have your hand up?
I do, but I thought I would have to wait in line for the Executive to make merry.
Nope.
Just, can you confirm, because I think I saw it in the paper, Councillor McKinnon, that the movements that you've described will largely be neutral to the Council in terms of Treasury overall, your sort of budgetary income versus expenditure. So we've seen that drop in the PWLB rate, but I think I saw that the effect was actually neutral. Can you confirm?
Well, the drop in the PWLB rate wouldn't be referred to in this paper, I don't think, because it didn't happen until very recently. So throughout the period under review, it was higher than, what would say higher than normal, an artificially high level. The communication from central government around that has been that they were wanting to discourage investment purely for yield. And now that they've sort of made that clear and they've tightened up the rules, they've dropped the PWLB down back to what you'd expect. With the proviso that councils don't invest primarily for yield, and we might be cut off from accessing PWLB if we were to do so. I'm not sure if I've answered this question there. I think I almost did, but please feel free if I haven't.
Going forward, what's the impact of the movements?
Well, I mean, we didn't undertake much additional borrowing at all at higher rates. It was one of the reasons why we launched the CMI. So going forward, the PWB rate dropping back down, when it does come to make those borrowings, then we'll be back at the original rates almost before the artificial bump. So roughly revenue neutral, but I'd have to do a bit more analysis to answer it fully.
Okay, I was putting words in your mouth, and
that's okay.
Sure,
it's Christmas.
You won't let me. But come back, if you wouldn't mind coming back on what the forward look might be in year, Ross, if I may call you Ross at Christmas, then, you know, it'd be nice, be useful. Thank you.
It's an outbreak of friendliness happening here. It's shocking. Happy to do so.
We'll be playing football between the trenches at this rate, won't we?
Okay, everybody. Any other questions before I move on from this? No? In which case the report is to note, and we can move forward to item 15 on our agenda this evening, which is members' questions. I'd just like to thank all of those members that have submitted questions for this evening's meetings, for this evening's executive meeting. Please note that in accordance with the new process, you don't need to say, I ask the question standing in my name. Your question will appear on screen and will be answered by the relevant portfolio holder. You'll then have an opportunity for a supplementary question, but please remember that this must be to clarify the response provided and not to introduce new business. And I would reiterate to everybody, it is to be an actual question and not a statement of your own views. In accordance with paragraph 5.12.9 of the Constitution, where questioners have more than one question, only their first will be answered. If all other first questions have been asked and answered, there is sufficient time, we will answer subsequent questions. Please note that time limit for members' questions is restricted to 60 minutes. And if your question has not been answered in that time, you'll receive a written response within 5 clear working days. The responses given will either be verbally at the meeting or in writing. If in writing, will be published on the Council's website. Now, I do note that we've got a number of absent questioners, in which case they will receive a written response to their question, just as we do with public questions, if they're not here to actually ask their question. So first, can we go to Councillor Stewart to answer Councillor Culver's question A on the agenda?
Leader, can I just, I don't know if you've seen, but Councillor Culver has let us know that Councillor Masters has had to leave. So he's happy to receive a written response to his questions when they come.
Thank you. And that's, I will make a note of that Councillor Masters isn't here either. So thank you for letting us know that, Councillor Culver.
Thank you, Councillor Culver, for your question. I'm aware that some of this subject has already been covered in the leader's answer to Mr. King earlier on, so I will try not to repeat if possible, unless it's absolutely essential. As both newly elected members in 2019, no doubt the time commitment that being a local elected representative necessitates came into sharp focus for both of us. As the leader reiterated in her earlier response, we aim through our member allowance scheme to not only fairly recompense for that time commitment, but try to eliminate the main reason that a candidate doesn't stand purely on financial terms. I myself have needed to reduce my hours at work to accommodate the responsibility that comes with a role on the executive, and I would have found that extremely difficult to do financially if the allowance wasn't available to cover part of my income shortfall. Also, from a very personal point of view, the unusual circumstances we found ourselves in this year has actually allowed me to attend more meetings than I might have been able to in the past. As a full-time employee, and as many of our members are, it is a very real balancing act between work and council commitments. The fact that we've been able to attend meetings such as this one using technology and not being required to travel has been a real positive in that respect for me. And I'm very aware of the potential opportunities this could open up in future, which I know the leader and executive are continuing to explore with officers, and which I hope may help to address some of the concerns a potential candidate may have about time management. I think it's fair to say that a councillor needs to be someone that residents relate to, someone like them, someone who will represent their community fairly, someone that will seek to uphold their values. And by the very nature of diversity, an individual has the freedom to be who they want to be and express themselves how they choose. Whilst this council works hard on inclusivity and has a robust equalities and diversity policy in place for employees, of course it goes beyond the remit of the council to directly influence political or independent candidates for election. But as the leaders said earlier, this council does support the Local Government Association Be a Councillor campaign and will be undertaking general communications in the run-up to the next election. All political parties will no doubt be encouraging a wider representation as they start their selection processes for the 2023 local elections. And of course, it is essential they consider what they can do to attract an interesting spectrum of candidates. As you know, I'm very keen to look at any ways that we as current members can communicate with those who may be thinking about standing. And I know that you have also been doing that, Councillor Culver. And personally, I would be very happy to talk directly to anyone who might be considering standing as a candidate to let them know what my experience has been, warts and all, and give them a feel for what they can expect from the role of a member if they are elected. Thank you.
Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Culver?
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Stewart. And I welcome the fact that we've exchanged some very positive emails in the last week or two about this very issue, and look forward to our meeting in the new year. We've talked directly, particularly about the issue of gender. I was wondering if you have any views on how we can encourage more ethnically diverse range of candidates and also people from the LGBT community as well.
Well, one of the things that I'm really pleased that we were able to do, and I don't think we made a big song and dance about it last week, was on Human Rights Day. We actually flew our rainbow flag for the first time. And I think those are the sorts of things that I really want to be within my own portfolio, trying to make sure that we look for those opportunities and that we do make sure that we communicate to our residents about those opportunities that are coming up. In terms of encouraging, I think there's quite a bit for me around encouraging young people as well as gender. I know that it can be perhaps a daunting prospect of stepping into a political sort of role. And certainly, as you know, my background originally was not political, and I didn't come to this through that particular route. I came in through wanting to work in my community, and that was through various school governing bodies and then as a parish councillor. So I think we have opportunities to talk to our parish councils and our town councils, and I believe that Councillor Vickers has got some ideas about that, which we'll be sharing, I think, in our meeting in January. So I think there is probably a lot that we can do. I can't actually tell you at the moment there is one particular strand that I'm going to follow. I think it's definitely a work in progress.
Thank you both. Can we move on then to, we're going to go down to question E on this agenda this evening, which is Councillor Pattenden to Councillor Bowick. Councillor Bowick, we can't hear you.
Thank you for pointing that out, Leader. Thank you for your question, Councillor Pattenden, and I hope you can hear me. Several teams from across the council are providing direct support to schools and early years setting leaders. These include education, HR, health and safety, and public health. The support they give includes the practical interpretation of guidance from the Department for Education, from South East Employers, the Health and Safety Executive, and Public Health England. Schools and settings have been supported to develop COVID-safe operational plans and appropriate risk assessments that take into account both the circumstances and the vulnerabilities of individuals. Some schools have additional responsibilities as employers of their own staff, for example, in voluntary aided and academy schools. The Education Service has maintained an ongoing and positive dialogue with the relevant unions dealing with issues that have arisen along the way. They were also instrumental, particularly at the start of the pandemic, in ensuring that staff had appropriate supplies of PPE. In addition, out-of-hours support has been given by education to heads to help them decide on appropriate courses of action when suspected or actual COVID cases arise. This has been widely appreciated. Now, recognizing the significant additional pressure throughout this year on heads and school staff, our educational psychology service set up mental health and wellbeing support for colleagues, including signposting materials and our own helpline. These channels of support are confidential, and they've been very well received by schools in assisting school leaders to identify and address issues.
Do you have a supplementary question, Councillor Pattenden?
I do, thank you. Private schools have had regular COVID testing of staff and pupils, and a lot more complete protection provided to teaching and support staff than you've just described. So would you agree with me that the same provisions should have been made available at all West Berks state schools, and that by not providing them, teaching staff, support staff and pupils at state schools have suffered?
Well, thank you for your supplementary, Councillor Pattenden. I'm going to struggle a bit to compare what we provide, which I think, what we have provided, which I think has been exceptional and has been very well received by the heads of our schools. It's difficult to provide to compare what we have been providing with what other the private schools you refer to have received from various sources, I presume. What I'm really pleased about, going to your point about testing, it's really encouraging that we're making, with government support and guidance, great progress on the introduction of comprehensive testing when schools return after the school break, after the Christmas break in January. And again, this comes back to the excellent work that our education service has been doing. They, in a matter of days, have put together a comprehensive advice to the heads of our schools, who are the people, the organisations that are actually going to conduct that testing.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bowick. We can now move on to question H on our agenda, which is Councillor Vickers to Councillor McKinnon.
Yep, thank you, Leader. And I'll answer that. I know it was addressed to both myself and Councillor Cole, but I'll answer it in the first instance, Councillor Vickers. So it's the Council's intention as landowners to appoint planning consultants to work with the local planning authority on the preparation of a supplementary planning documents or other appropriate mechanism, and also the required supporting evidence base. That documentation should be completed by autumn 2021. Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Vickers?
Well, it really is addressed to Councillor Cole, my question, because it's not so much the London Road itself, but the impact of potentially 500 or so homes upon the housing site allocation within the local plan. And if there is no progress on the planning side of the London Road Industrial Estate by the time the local plan goes to inspection, or maybe even by the time it's adopted in, it would appear, early 2023, then we could be allocating up to 500 homes worth of land for housing, which aren't needed because they, you know, your own local plan, your own master plan for LRIE says that number of houses can go in. So it's the impact of the progress or lack of progress on the planning side for LRIE and that, and the impact that has on the local plan overall that I'm concerned about.
Councillor Cole, do you want to pick up that supplementary question?
Thank you. I think, first of all, 500 houses is an erroneous assumption, Councillor, because London Road Industrial Estate is principally protected employment land and will always be such. and therefore the number of homes that can be fitted onto that site would be nowhere near 500. And as you know, Councillor Vickers, irrespective of a local plan being produced, there are always opportunities for applications to come forward during the local plan period, which contribute towards housing. North Newbury is a good example of that. It wasn't in the local plan, it was put forward and the permission was granted at appeal. So I don't think the fact that A, it's 500 houses, and B, any number of houses that may or may not be included on London Road Industrial Estate will affect our housing number.
Thank you, Councillor Cole. Can we therefore move to item I on the questions this evening, which is Councillor Martha Vickers' question to Councillor Sumner.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Vickers, for your question. It's a very short answer to this, in all honesty. I've also been in touch with the Managing Director and his team at Great Western Railway recently with regards to this. As it currently stands, they have no end date to this. It's an ongoing process that they were happy to bring in. And noting that we are not solely reliant on Great Western, yes, I'm happy to write to the Secretary of State on behalf of the authority.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm very pleased to hear that. Thank you, Councillor Sumner. Can I just say, were you aware that, to my knowledge, there was an end date of March? So whatever, anyway, I'm pleased that you've agreed to write, and thank you for your research into it as well. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you both. Can we move then to item J on this evening's, or question J, sorry, which is Councillor Abbs to Councillor Stewart.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Thank you, Councillor Abbs. I believe that you have received this answer to your question following the Personnel Committee that was held last week, might have been the week before. They go so fast. So do you have a supplementary?
Yeah, yes, I do. I didn't receive a full answer, so I'd prefer you to actually read the response out so that I can ask my supplementary to that, because I had a part answer, which is not the answer, not the full answer. So, but the supplementary I can kind of give you in advance if you want.
Would you like me to read the? I apologise.
I thought it'd be of a general interest, but the supplementary is going to be this. Any time that we hire to a senior position, whether we have rules to hire internally first or not, leads in the real world, the commercial world, to kind of a very small pool of people, and therefore the possibility, I'm not saying that has happened, but the possibility of not getting the right talent or the best talent for the job. So my supplementary question is very much aimed at, are you going to start to look at how we recruit to these senior positions and avoid situations where we end up with one or two applicants to choose from in a senior post?
Okay, firstly, can I say I apologise if you didn't have the full response. I think officers felt that they had given you the full response, and part of what I have in terms of that response is actually a table which is not easy to read out to you. So we'll definitely pass that on to you so that you have that in writing.
Just so you know, I never received that, Joe. So.
Okay, fine. So what I'll do is, this response uses the definition of senior roles as the following. So chief executive, executive directors and service directors, just so that we're making sure that we're talking about the same sort of roles. All senior posts are advertised both internally and externally and are member appointments. And that's for the chief exec, exec directors and service directors. The posts are usually advertised on Jobs Go Public, as well as in appropriate online or hard copy publications such as the Municipal Journal. Where necessary, additional support is enlisted from an external headhunting or recruitment agency. This has only been necessary, though, in one case recently. The only exception to this is that currently the post of service director is ring-fenced to internal candidates only for the initial phase where there are existing heads of service in post, as this is in accordance with the organisational change and redundancy policy and the senior management review. I can tell you that over the last 3 years, we've recruited to a long list, which is the table that I won't read out to you, of senior officer posts. I would say that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, could be 13 if my counting is not as good as it should be. It should be noted that quantity does not always equate with quality, as you would know. To date, we've always had a good response to adverts, and in all but one case, we have recruited first time, and all those appointed are still in post or have been promoted. The average number of applicants to externally advertised roles has been 15, with 5 shortlisted for interview over the past 3 years. And we do keep under review steps needed to be taken to continue to attract the highest calibre of candidate, as you suggest. And in fact, the recent executive director place role attracted 46 applications and infers that the steps already taken are providing strong number of applicants. And in terms of your supplementary, and I think the table will help to reassure you, of those, and I think it's 13, only 3 of them were internal only processes. All of the rest were both internal and external. And I would agree with you that looking at the dates, we had a lot lower numbers and responses, perhaps 2 or 3 years ago. But actually, when you look at it from 2019 through into 2020, it certainly has escalated quite a lot. So sort of from maybe 9 applications back in 2018 to 20 and above. So does that answer your initial question and your supplementary? Although I appreciate we'll also need to send you this table as well.
It almost sounds like get another chance at a supplementary, doesn't it?
No,
really?
no.
I won't. I wouldn't put you in the position.
I was being very Christmassy there.
Okay, thank you both of you. Can we move to our final question of this evening then, which is actually it's question K, and it's Councillor Abbs again, but this time to Councillor McKinnon.
Yeah, thanks, Leader. Hi, Councillor Abbs. The answer to your question is no. That said, the Council is currently reviewing future staff working arrangements given the ongoing experience of the pandemic. The project is entitled Time Lords 2, which is likely to lead to an increase in home working and a rationalisation in council corporate office space. Now, it's hoped to bring a report to the Executive on this in April next year. Once the council's future office requirements have been clarified, it would then seem appropriate to review whether a new office might be considered. The council's current office provision in Newbury is dated. It will become increasingly costly to maintain and does not meet a high environmental standard. New offices have been considered in the past. They're proving too costly, particularly in the context of having to find ongoing savings. It would, however, be appropriate to reconsider this position once our future space requirements are clear. Do you have a supplementary?
Actually, no, thank you, Mr. McKinnon. I will wait until we announce something, or if and when we announce something.
Thank you. That should conclude the members' questions of everybody that we have present here this evening. So that concludes the business of the Executive tonight. So I'd like to thank everybody for their attendance. Before I just close off, I'd just like to remind everybody to wait until the live stream ceases before leaving the meeting. All that remains is for me to wish you all a very Merry Christmas, as we won't meet before. And I hope everybody has a safe festive season, and to thank you all for your attendance here this evening. So thank you everybody, and I look forward to seeing you all again in the new year.